They were officially designated acceptable losses. 381 SEALs, trapped in a canyon so twisted that high-tech targeting systems were useless. A place command had already labeled a death trap. Major Kincaid, a man who worshipped data, insisted their rescue was a mathematical impossibility. But as he prepared the loss reports, a 65-year-old female pilot they called the Flying Museum was walking toward an equally ancient A-10 Warthog. Kincaid's voice crackled over the radio, ordering her to stand down. But she keyed the mic and said just one thing. Before I tell you what those words were, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. The air over Kestrel Forward Operating Base in Afghanistan was a shimmering curtain of heat and dust, thick with the buzz of modern warfare. The sound of the 21st century was everywhere. MQ. 9 Reapers hummed on the tarmac like metallic insects, their sensor balls swiveling with silent omniscience. Young pilots, barely out of their teens, laughed as they emerged from air-conditioned trailers, their minds still buzzing from VR combat simulations where pixels bled and reset. The entire base was a monument to the new way of war, clean, data-driven, and managed from distance. And in the middle of it all, Captain Eleanor, Ellie, Vance was an anachronism. At 65, with lines etched around her eyes that traced flight paths over Vietnam jungles and Iraqi deserts, she was a relic. Recalled from the reserves to serve as a simulator instructor, she was the ghost in the machine everyone tried to ignore. While the young hotshots chased digital bandits, Ellie's domain was a stuffy, forgotten corner of a maintenance hangar. There, spread across a massive wooden table, was a paper topographical map of the Khyner province, its surface worn smooth by the drag of her hands. Armed with a protractor, a worn-down pencil, and decades of instinct, she was meticulously charting wind shears and potential dead zones for radar, things an algorithm couldn't feel. Her presence was a quiet rebuke to the base's prevailing philosophy, a philosophy championed by Major Kincaid. At 35, Kincaid was the golden boy of the digital age. He walked with the brisk, unwavering confidence of a man who believed the chaos of battle could be tamed by code. In the morning briefing, held in a darkened, climate-controlled command center, he stood before a massive screen displaying the glowing, predictive pathways of his crown jewel, the AI Battlefield Prediction System, or Oracle. He gestured to the intricate web of data. The Oracle processes 10 million variables a second. It predicts enemy movements with 98.7% accuracy. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't get scared, and it doesn't make mistakes based on gut feelings. His eyes flicked to Ellie, a small, dismissive smile playing on his lips. It renders certain traditional methods obsolete. The room, filled with ambitious young officers, murmured in agreement. Ellie stood up. Her voice, though quiet, cut through the hum of the servers. Major, your model has a blind spot. She pointed to a tiny, insignificant-looking fissure on the holographic map. Right there, the serpent's throat. The canyon walls are too steep and contain high iron concentrations. They'll scramble targeting pods and create a GPS shadow. It's a perfect kill box. Kincaid's smile vanished. Captain Vance, with all due respect, your concerns are noted. However, the data does not support a high-threat assessment for that sector. He turned back to the screen, his tone final. We follow the data here, not folklore. He effectively dismissed her, and from that moment on, she was formally excluded from all tactical planning sessions. But Kincaid and his acolytes didn't know about Ellie's nights. After the base fell into a quiet rhythm, she would slip away to an even more forgotten part of the facility, a hangar containing a single, derelict A-10 simulator. It wasn't the sleek VR pod the new pilots used. It was a hulking beast of hydraulics and raw steel, a machine she had painstakingly maintained herself with scavenged parts. Night after night, she'd strap herself into the worn cockpit and fly the serpent's throat. She never engaged the advanced targeting systems. Instead, she practiced what they called iron sights gunnery. Using nothing but the gun reticle, her eyes, and a deep, intuitive understanding of ballistics, she rehearsed danger-close fire missions. She learned to read the subtle shifts in terrain, to anticipate where an enemy would seek cover, to feel the Warthog's response as she pushed it into impossibly tight turns. She ran the scenario 47 times, each run more precise than the last. She was preparing for a storm she knew the Oracle couldn't see coming. The storm broke at 13:47 hours. The siren didn't wail. It shrieked, a piercing cry that sliced through the mundane afternoon heat. In the ops center, the confident hum of technology was replaced by a rising tide of panic. The main screen, once a display of orderly predictions, was now a chaotic nightmare of red icons. The location, the Serpent's Throat. Just as Ellie had warned, a SEAL detachment, 381 souls in total, had walked directly into a perfectly executed ambush. They were surrounded, pinned down by over 800 enemy fighters dug into the ridges. 2 active SAM sites had turned the sky above the canyon into a no-fly zone. Major Kincaid stood frozen, his face a pale mask of disbelief. His prized Oracle was useless. The system's neat, logical pathways had dissolved into a mess of error messages. It couldn't compute a solution for a fight where the enemy was, in some places, less than 50 meters from friendly forces. The F-16s, circling high above, were helpless. Their rules of engagement forbade them from firing within 100 meters. The room was thick with the suffocating silence of impending disaster. Kincaid, clutching a copy of Air Support Doctrine like a holy text, finally spoke, his voice thin and brittle. "Begin drafting the loss report." At that moment, the door slid open and Ellie Vance walked in. The chaos of the room seemed to part around her. She didn't look at the panicked faces or the flickering screens. Her eyes were fixed on the tactical map. "Major," she said, her voice a bedrock of calm in the storm. "Scramble my A-10. I can get them out." Kincaid spun around, his shock momentarily replaced by a surge of fury. "Absolutely not. That's a suicide mission, Captain. I will not sacrifice a pilot and a Cold War-era relic on some nostalgic whim. It's against every regulation in the book." Just then, a young comms tech, his voice cracking, cut through the argument. "Sir, Nomad lead reports they have less than 30 minutes of ammunition remaining." 30 minutes. The words hung in the air, a death sentence. In that instant, regulations and data models became meaningless. There was only the clock. Ellie didn't waste another breath arguing. She gave Kincaid a long, steady look, then turned and walked out. In the quiet of the hallway, she closed her eyes and counted to 30, her mind a flurry of calculations. 10 minutes from locker to wheels up. 12 minutes to the valley. It was a window so narrow, it was practically a razor's edge. She moved with a purpose that belied her age. Back in her small, Spartan room, she pulled out a worn, often-read letter from her daughter. On the back of the envelope, she scribbled a short, simple message. "If you're reading this, it's because 381 lives were being choked by red tape. I chose to act." She slid the letter under her pillow. Then, she walked to the far end of the flight line, to a dusty, sun-beaten hangar where a single A-10 Thunderbolt II sat in silent repose. The ground crews had nicknamed the plane the Matriarch. It was old, scarred, and like its pilot, largely ignored. As she suited up, the tower frequency crackled with Kincaid's voice, now bordering on hysteria, demanding to know her intentions. She ignored it. Climbing into the cockpit, she strapped herself in and began the startup sequence. On the open guard frequency, for anyone and everyone to hear, she made her only transmission. "Any station, this is Ghost. Departing Kestrel, inbound Serpent's Throat. 381 Americans are about to be overrun. I am breaking every rule to save them." With a deafening roar, the Matriarch's engines ignited, and at 14:23, she was airborne, a lone gray ghost climbing into the unforgiving Afghan sky. The radio chatter from the valley was a ragged tapestry of desperation. The SEAL commander, Nomad lead, kept his transmissions tight and professional, but the strained cadence in his voice told the real story. They were counting their last magazines. As Ellie's A-10, the Matriarch, banked hard toward the mountains, The lead F-16 pilot checked in, his voice frustrated. Visual on the target area. Unable to engage. I say again, unable to engage. Danger close. Ellie keyed her mic, her voice cutting through the static like a diamond. Nomad lead, this is Ghost. Mark your position with IR. I'll work the edge. A moment of stunned silence. Then a surge of disbelief and hope. Ghost, confirm. You are authorized for danger close. I am authorized, Ellie replied, her voice leaving no room for argument, to save American lives. Designate. As the serpent's throat opened up beneath her, the scene was a horrifying, living replica of her 47 simulator runs. 3 ridgelines formed a perfect U, spitting fire down into the natural bowl where the SEALs had made their last stand. Machine guns on the eastern ridge were chewing craters into their cover. Without hesitation, Ellie rolled in. She didn't rely on the sophisticated targeting pod. She used the knowledge burned into her soul. Her thumb depressed the trigger for a 2-second burst. The sound that erupted from the A-10 wasn't just gunfire. It was a physical force, a visceral, terrifying roar that the ground troops would later describe as the sound of God tearing a mountain in half. The 30mm GU, 8 Avenger cannons spoke, and a stream of tungsten shells, each the size of a milk bottle, erased the machine gun nest in a blossom of dust and rock. The enemy fire from that position stopped. Instantly, she pulled up, feeling the G-force press her into her seat, a familiar and comforting weight. She rolled into her second run, this time targeting an assault team scrambling down the northern slope, barely 70 meters from the SEALs. A short, precise stitch of cannon fire cut across the rock face. The movement ceased. Her eyes, honed by tens of thousands of flight hours, confirmed it. No friendly strobes were in the impact zone. Ghost, solid hits. Nomad lead yelled, his voice electric. Western Ridge. They're at 75 meters. 75 meters was a kill zone for modern jets. It was where the A-10 lived. Ellie broke left, diving into a steep, slicing turn that would have made a younger pilot black out. She lined up a reticle just below a rocky outcropping where muzzle flashes blinked and pressed a half-second burst. A perfectly straight line of impacts appeared, drawing a boundary of death between the friendly strobes and the enemy. Down below, the entire valley seemed to hold its breath. Everyone, friend and foe alike, realized what had just happened. A pilot had just placed rounds inside a zone no one was supposed to touch. Back in the ops center, they watched it unfold on the main screen. A single green icon was dancing a ballet of death amidst a sea of red. Kincaid was speechless. Morrison, the old-school Marine liaison, slammed his fist on the console. She's the only asset that can do this. Support her or start writing the eulogies. Hayes, the by-the-book inspector general, began quoting regulations about unauthorized engagements. But Kincaid wasn't listening to him anymore. He was watching the screen, seeing the impossible happen. He hesitated for a long second, his career flashing before his eyes. Then he keyed the command net. All stations support the A-10. Give Ghost whatever she needs. Ellie didn't hear him. She had already shut off the command frequency. The only voices she needed were the ones on the ground. She was past permission. Her mind was a cold, clear engine of calculation, replaying the secret playbook she had written in the dead of night. Kill the air defenses first. A Maverick missile streaked from her wing and obliterated a SAM site on the southern spur. Then, she ducked behind a ridge, using the terrain to break the other site's lock. One lane open. Next, stitch the ridgeline positions, but not the most obvious ones. She targeted the key nodes that anchored the crossfire, the linchpins of the enemy's formation. Every press of the trigger was a short, controlled tap, letting the dust and sound do as much work as the bullets. Talk to me, Nomad, she commanded. Push your teams west under my fire. I'm walking rounds uphill, just ahead of you. The cadence of the ground radio began to change, the panic replaced by sharp, active verbs. Moving, set, on the bound. The SEALs were fighting back. The Ghost had given them a chance. The battle for the Serpent's throat transformed. It was no longer a desperate last stand. It was a brutally orchestrated breakout, conducted by a 65-year-old maestro in the sky. Ellie Vance wasn't just an aerial weapon. She became the SEAL's eyes, their shield, and their guiding hand. Nomad, see that shallow fold on the west ridge? It's a seam. Satellites can't see it, but I walked it on my topo map 100 times. It'll get you out. A pause, then Nomad leads voice, filled with awe. Ghost, the fold is real. We can move in it. Do it, Ellie commanded. I'll rake the high points 50 meters ahead of you. The cannon thudded again, a giant zipper of tungsten and fire closing across the stone above them. Enemy fire, which had been a constant torrent, now stuttered and fell silent. The SEALs bounded from cover, moving with renewed speed and purpose. For the first time all day, the blue icons on the map in the ops center began to advance. An enemy element tried to collapse the corridor from above, closing to 40 meters. Ellie flattened her dive, brought the pipper low, and pulsed a 3/4 second burst that shaved the top of the ridge like a carpenter's plane, sending chips of rock and metal flying. The threat vanished. By the time the F-16s were cleared to engage the outer rings of the enemy formation, Ellie had already decapitated the inner circle. The path was clear. Rotors inbound, came the voice from base command, now fully committed. Shocks 1 and 2, 3 minutes out. 3 minutes was an eternity. Ellie made sure the enemy knew it. The first Chinook helicopter surfed its own brownout into the narrow fold of the canyon. Ellie pushed her A-10 out to the rim, hunting for anything that had a line of sight to the landing zone. 2 muzzle flashes blinked from a cluster of rocks. She answered with a diagonal burst that zipped across the stone, and the flashes died. Chalk 1 lifting, the radio crackled. The first stick of SEALs was airborne. The second Chinook thundered in. As it settled, a PKM team tried to shift position to get a clear shot. Ellie saw the movement before they could even set their bipod. She snipped their thread with 3 perfectly placed rounds. Chalk 2 lifting. We're green. The last bird, a heavy CH-47 carrying the rear security element, risked it all. As it lumbered into the sky, a SAM seeker tone chirped in Ellie's headset. The last threat. The enemy's last card. She was already moving, diving low, putting a ridge between her and the missile's line of sight. It streaked past, searching for her heat signature, and found only rock. She popped back up, found the desperate launch team trying to reload, and ended their chapter with a short, merciless tap. All aboard. We are off, the air mission commander announced. The valley fell silent. There was only the wind, the dust, and the sound of breathing in her headset. Nomad Lee came back on, his voice clipped and formal, because some moments demand ceremony. Ghost, be advised. 381 souls accounted for. 0 friendly Kia during exfil. We owe you our lives. Copy, Nomad was all she said. She flew lazy, protective S-turns high above the canyon until the last helicopter was just a dot on the horizon. Then, she turned for home. Back at Kestrel, the runway stretched out before her like a question mark. She landed smoothly and taxied her spot. As she cut the engines and popped the canopy, the sound of the base rushed in. And she saw them. Hundreds of them. Maintainers, ammo troops, medics, clerks, pilots. The entire base was standing on the flight line, not cheering, but standing in absolute, profound silence. It wasn't a pep rally. It was something older, rawer. It was respect. She climbed down, her knees aching slightly. Major Kincaid was waiting, flanked by the Inspector General and 2 MPs. She stood at attention, ready for the consequences. You departed without authorization, Captain Vance, Kincaid said, his voice flat, carrying across the silent tarmac. You violated direct orders. You engaged at ranges that defy all written doctrine. Yes, sir, Ellie said, her voice steady. A long pause hung in the air. Kincaid took a deep breath. You also brought home 381 Americans without a scratch on them. Therefore, the only thing you will answer today is a question from me. He looked her directly in the eye, his own reflecting a mixture of awe and utter confusion. How in the hell did you do that? We're going to write it down. We're going to write it all down, so the next pilot doesn't have to learn it at 3 in the morning, alone in a locked simulator. This wasn't just a story about a pilot disobeying orders. It's a powerful reminder that above the cold logic of technology and the rigid lines of bureaucracy, there is human experience. It proves that intuition, skill, and the courage to shatter the rules when lives are on the line are the most valuable assets on any battlefield. Some truths can't be coded into an algorithm. They can only be etched into a soul by time and trial. Have you ever been underestimated because of your age or your experience by someone who thought they were more modern? What would you have thought if you were Major Kincaid, watching that lone icon defy your data and rewrite the rules of the possible? In your own life, when the stakes are high, do you put more trust in a precise algorithm or in a seasoned veteran who has walked the ground before? If this story about courage and wisdom moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the unsung heroes who get the job done. Share this video with someone who has taught you a valuable lesson that you couldn't have learned from a book. We read every single comment, and we respect the experiences you share. More stories about battlefield miracles and incredible female heroes are waiting for you right on your screen. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with a true story about the unbreakable bond of brothers in arms.